Well, it's very possible that the next attorney general could be from the state of Missouri, and it's not Eric Schmidt, who is the current junior U.S. Senator from Missouri, who was getting talked about last week as a potential candidate to be the next AG. Eric Schmidt took himself out of the running earlier this week. Well, now I talked to somebody early this morning, right before we got on the air, who told me that they were at Mar-a-Lago and that Andrew Bailey, the current attorney general for the state of Missouri, had meetings with Donald Trump yesterday. They went great. And while it's believed that Matt Whitaker has the inside track, it looks like Andrew Bailey and Matt Whitaker are the two finalists to be Donald Trump's next attorney general. Now, the belief is, from the person I talked to down at Mar-a-Lago, Whitaker does have the inside track, but it does look like we could have Andrew Bailey as the next AG from the state of Missouri. Now, this is a very interesting development because, as you may recall, Andrew Bailey is somebody who did a very good job when he was appointed the AG after Eric Schmidt got the U.S. Senate gig. But there was this belief that, well, is he going to get Donald Trump's endorsement in a tough primary that he was in back in August? And it turned out he did. He did end up getting an endorsement from Donald Trump. He said that both himself and his opponent in that primary were both capable of doing the job. And were both able to potentially be the next AG in Missouri. And that was Will Scharf, who was on Fox News a lot on behalf of Donald Trump, working with his legal team through a lot of all these legal cases the last few years. And the thought was that, well, Trump might endorse Will Scharf in this race, and Andrew Bailey, who is the incumbent, is going to be in trouble. Well, Trump said both guys would do a good job. He basically did a dual endorsement, and Andrew Bailey won that primary by 26 points. And Bailey rolled to a win last week in the general election, beating Elad Gross by 22 points, really 23 points, 60-37. So Bailey will either stay here as a great attorney general in the state of Missouri, which is now one of the most important roles in any state, especially when you've got red states going up against overreaching blue federal governments. But still, even with a bureaucracy as big as it is in D.C., you got to have a good AG. And while I think Andrew Bailey will be and has been a great attorney general in the state of Missouri, if you get a call from Donald Trump and he wants you to be your attorney general or his attorney general, who's going to turn that down? You'd be insane to turn that down. Now, Andrew Bailey, like me, does have, he's got a young family. He's got deep roots here in Missouri. He's a Missouri kid. He's a veteran. I mean, he is everything that you would want to check off with all the boxes. And while I don't think he's one of these guys that really wants to be in D.C., I know he's got roots here. He's got his base here. He's got young kids here. If the president-elect calls you and says, will you be my attorney general? I don't see how you say no. But once again, I'm not convinced he's got the inside track, but I do know he has had multiple meetings with Donald Trump, and he is one of the two finalists for that job. Now, meantime, Donald Trump continues to roll out some of these appointments. And I want to share with you some of the reaction that has been out there in the wake of Pete Hegseth of Fox News getting selected to be Donald Trump's Secretary of Defense. Pete Hegseth is a veteran. He is also a Fox and Friends weekend host. And there was a meltdown on CNN last night over this. Mark, I'm going to put this clip in at 8:05. We had some internet issues this morning, so some of these clips that I've wanted to get to I've not been able to get to yet. So this is Scott Jennings, who is the lone conservative voice on CNN these days, who I would make the next press secretary. I just think he's so good on his feet. He's so smart. He handles the panels on CNN with such great temperament, and he's always got his facts behind him. So they're freaking out last night on CNN about Pete Hegseth of Fox News getting named as the Secretary of Defense. And take a listen to Scott Jennings on CNN just go scorched earth on Carl Bernstein. Yes, that Carl Bernstein. You're right. Yes, the Watergate Carl Bernstein, who's freaking out over Pete Hegseth, and Scott Jennings puts him right in his place. Let's roll it.
You want to have confidence in the current leadership of the Pentagon and the way the defense situation has been operating for the last several years. I mean, from the Afghanistan pullout, which was an extreme debacle for which no one was held accountable. We've had spy balloons flying over the United States. We built a $300 million pier as a public relations stunt, which wound up killing an American service member. I'd say I've had just about enough of the so-called insiders running the Defense Department. I think we ought to give Pete Hegseth a chance because he's got two insiders. All the criticism of him is that he's not the expected Washington pick, and I'm just saying to you that the American people just voted against the expected Washington pick. So he's got 20 years in service, Afghanistan, Iraq, 2 Bronze Stars, Princeton, Harvard. Yeah, he's on TV, but so are the rest of us.
By the way, that listen you just gave,
I think he ought to be given a chance.
That listen you just gave is really interesting because you highlighted a bunch of things that the civilian leadership of the country decided on. In the military, their job was just to execute. They execute.
How did it go?
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
How did it go?
In terms of the decision making, you're assigning decision making responsibility to the military over things that civilians were responsible for.
So you make a good point. The civilian leadership made decisions, and then the people they put in charge of the Pentagon carried it out. And it was all pretty much a disaster. So now we have a new president who I think got elected in part because of some of those disasters, and he's going to put in some of the non-insiders in charge of not just this agency, but a bunch of them. Now, look, they've got to perform. They've got to perform. I mean, we've got 53 U.S. senators that are Republicans. And Pete Hegseth, he's an American hero. The man won 2 Bronze Stars for his service, and he's been a champion for veterans. He's going to have to go up there just like everybody else and prove his knowledge of how to do this job. He's not immune from that, but we ought to give this man a chance, in my opinion.
Scott Jennings last night putting the CNN panel in their place. I look at it and I say to myself, okay, well, Pete Hegseth was not the expected pick. Are there people in the Pentagon right now who might have a similar worldview to Donald Trump who would be a little bit better? Maybe. I don't know. But I know this much, okay? The guy who's done the job right now, who's got all the Pentagon history in the world, Lloyd Austin, has been the worst Secretary of Defense in my lifetime. Lloyd Austin, the guy who oversaw the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan, who most recently oversaw the building of a $300 million pier to nowhere along the Gaza Strip. Remember, they were trying to get food and everything else to Gaza, and they built a $300 million pier that collapsed and did absolutely nothing. Like, it doesn't get any worse than Lloyd Austin, who had all the traditional experience that you would think you would want out of a Secretary of Defense. So Pete Hegseth goes in there, and I don't know, we'll see what kind of job he does. Like Scott Jennings laid out, I think he's worth giving a chance to, and maybe shaking it up a little bit and having a guy who maybe doesn't have that extensive Pentagon experience. Let's see what happens. Can't be any worse than what's currently in place with Lloyd Austin. So I'll give it a shot. I'm happy to do that. And then I saw this from Politico. They wrote an article about Pete Hegseth with the headline, "Who the F is this guy? Defense World reacts to Trump's surprise Pentagon pick." And I'll read one sentence or 2 sentences here in the Politico piece about Pete Hegseth of Fox News getting the Secretary of Defense nomination. One assessment was more blunt. Quote, "Who the F is this guy?" said a defense industry lobbyist who was granted anonymity to offer candid views. The lobbyist said they had hoped for someone who actually has an extensive background in defense. That would be a good start. Well, as I just shared on Twitter from Yashar Ali, Politico unintentionally building grassroots support for Pete Hegseth by leading with this quote on background from a defense industry lobbyist. Boy, the lobbyists are upset. So I should be upset? The American people should be upset? Come on now. 913-408-7957. Let's go to Paul. He's in Kansas City. Paul, what's happening?
Hey, Pete, yeah, I was watching the meltdown yesterday. One reason they're melting down is he doesn't come from the military-industrial complex, and that's what they don't like. Also, what Pete's going to do, he's going to bring back the warrior mentality. Look, he's going to put our tanks back on the firing range. Soldiers aren't going to be watching DEI PowerPoint slides. They're going to be on the rifle range doing live fire exercises. And if the division has to deploy the Russian front, we're not going to end up like Napoleon's Grand Army being devastated. That's what he's going to bring to the Defense Department, period.
Yep, that is well said. That is very well said. And I totally agree with you. I saw that, too. They were knocking him because I guess at some point on TV, what did Pete Hegseth say? Something like, women shouldn't be in combat. Is that controversial? I mean, women can absolutely serve, but women in combat roles, is that really controversial to say that we should not have women in combat roles? Mark, I'm going to pop this clip in there as well. Sorry, but, we had some technical issues this morning. It's a very brief clip. You'll see it there below the one I just posted in there. Right up there, you'll see it. I'll play it from Pete Hegseth. It was just a few days ago that he made these comments that also had people freaking out on social media yesterday. And let's roll Pete Hegseth on this.
I'm straight up just saying we should not have women in combat roles. It hasn't made us more effective, hasn't made us more lethal, has made fighting more complicated. We've all served with women, and they're great. Mm-hmm. It just, our institutions don't have to incentivize that in places where not traditionally, over human history, men in those positions are more capable.
Now, I suppose if you don't believe that gender roles exist, I suppose if you believe gender is fluid, that might offend you. But, is that a disqualifying thing for Pete Hegseth to say that CNN was running on loop last night? No. Women can absolutely serve. Women have done an incredible job serving this nation. But in combat roles, is that controversial? I know the DEI crowd isn't going to like that, but I don't much care. And guess what? The American people don't care. The American people gave a big double bird to wokeness last Tuesday. So I'm done pretending that we're in the minority. Oh, that's so offensive. Oh, my goodness. Stop. It's not offensive. It's not controversial. And I would imagine the majority of the American people would also agree with that statement. 913-408-7957. Pete Hegseth, Fox News host. He hosts the weekend edition of Fox and Friends, and he's been a guest on this show many times. We actually have a lot of people who have been guests on this show who are getting some of these appointments. Tom Homan, border czar, Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense. Those two come to mind, but a lot of these people, Mike Huckabee, we've had a lot of these folks who are getting high-level positions with Donald Trump who have been guests here on KCMO, and we could have one of our own, Attorney General Andrew Bailey out of Missouri, be Donald Trump's AG. I told you just a few minutes ago that he was at Mar-a-Lago for meetings with Donald Trump over the last day or so. So he appears to be one of the two finalists for the AG spot. But the Hegseth one really has people all bent out of shape because, well, he's on TV. He's not ready for this role. Oh, and yeah, Lloyd Austin was. He's done such a great job the last 4 years. Spare me, please. 913-408-7957. Harrisonville, that's where Merlin is. Go ahead, my man.
Well, good morning. I was just calling in to make the point that the defense lobbyists are upset because they have a new outsider coming in that they can't control. He's not a puppet that they've been feeding millions of dollars to, so he's not going to do what they want him to do.
Exactly. You're right. That is a very big part of it. That's the underbelly of that whole swamp where when you're part of that, just you're part of the swampy mentality that the Pentagon has to run under to some degree. You've got a lot of these people already who've got you by the short hairs, and that's not going to be the case with Pete Hegseth.
Yep.
At least not out of the gates. There are always big money interests who make their way into politics left and right, but at least it's not going to be part of the same culture that currently exists. I'll give him that much.
Right. I think you get a competent guy in there like him, and he's going to do good things.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, do I think there's going to be a learning curve? Absolutely. For a guy who's kind of walking in fresh-faced, big-eyed, doesn't know a lot about how some of the things work on the inside, yes. But if he's smart enough to figure it out on the fly, then he should be A-okay. Adrian and Shawnee on the Females in Combat, which was a clip from Pete Hegseth that CNN was running on loop last night. Go ahead, Adrian. Good morning.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. Good to be on the show. So I have an idea that I think would please everyone. So out of all the female, I know what a woman is.
It's a good start. Good start. You know what a woman is? You've watched Matt Walsh's video, What is a Woman, from the Daily Wire. So
right.
Great. We're on the same page to start. We can identify a woman. Well done, Adrian. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Take a bow. Okay, go ahead.
Voluntary, and this month, you choose the most skilled female fighter. And her job is this. She gets to be the filter for the first round of private training. And any man that she conquers fails.
Fails? You mean the guy can't go into combat if she beats him on whatever test you're talking about? Physical test?
We're talking about women in combat.
Yes.
Combat.
I'm just curious, do you have any experience in this, Adrian, or did this just pop into your mind as you were listening this morning?
Latter.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that, man. Thank you very much. All right. Well, listen, here's the reality. 913-408-7957. The reality, we know this. Men and women are different. The average man is going to be stronger and faster than the average woman. It doesn't mean that women are not faster than men or stronger than men in some cases. There are plenty of bodybuilder women who could outbench John and Mark. I don't know about me, but definitely outbench John and Mark. But women in combat, and saying that I don't think they should be in combat doesn't mean they can't serve and be incredibly valuable members of our military. But in combat is something that's a different story. And that was supposed to be, we're going to own you. Oh, man, Pete Hegseth said this. He's never going to get confirmed as Secretary of Defense. I think you're misreading the room a little bit there, guys and gals at CNN. Wokeness, in large part, got killed last Tuesday night. 913-408-7957 on KCMO Talk Radio. Joe, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
How you doing, Pete?
I'm doing well, Joe. What's up, buddy?
You know what? I wanted to chime in a little bit on this women in combat thing that for some reason people magically raised a fuss about. Since when have we forgotten that women are supposed to be protected? I don't understand that.
Well, that's very sexist of you.
Great. I should be thrown in prison for such a statement. But the thing is, if I'm fighting a war and it's a very important thing for us to win, what do I want? We can have them doing the drones and stuff like that.
Yep.
But goodness gracious, you want them protected at all costs. And when we lost that in this country, is a very, very sad time in this country.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Run drones. There's a lot that can be done in the military that isn't frontline combat, where suddenly it's like, oh, no, I got a 250-pound guy who's getting shot, and I got a 100-pound woman who's got to pick him up. I mean, listen, it sounds like Joe needs some more DEI training, though, is what it sounds like to me.